Hello everyone, my name is Chris, and today I'm going to be starting a series which I call Blueprint for Composition. So just a little bit of background information why I am doing this series. So I work in a high school, and my primary responsibility is working with students who are either from other countries outside of America, whose first language is not English, and who have been placed in the public school system here in America. And it is my job to try to help them to develop their English language skills in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So I work with international students or students whose parents are from other countries and they may have grown up here in America, but their first language at home is not English. So today we're going to start this series called Blueprint for Composition, as I say. And the purpose of this series is to help people improve their sentence composition skills. Because a lot of times, what is the biggest stumbling block for my students when they come from other countries and are trying to, write papers and write essays and do classwork for their academic subjects is the writing. The academic writing is always something that takes a very long time for them to develop and develop well and be able to do well. So this series is designed to help people understand what I call the building blocks of sentences, because we have to start somewhere. And in English, the basic block that we want to look at, the building block, is the sentence. All right? So we're not just going to look at, individual words and things like that, but we're going to build how to approach writing of good quality sentences and well-composed sentences. So we're going to start at the very foundational level with this first video today. And we're going to build up from there into increasingly more complex sentence structures and sentence organization techniques. But for today, we're just going to look at the most essential parts of the sentence. So, let's get started. So, one of the things that you have to understand is how sentences are put together in English. So I know in other languages, sentences may be arranged differently, and they may have the same or similar parts, or maybe not the same at all. I don't really know all different languages, how they arrange their sentences, but I do know a few which are different from the way English sentences are organized. So, as I said, the sentence is really the foundational piece of any written language, and in this case, we're talking about English. So, how to construct sentences? Well, you have to understand what sentences are composed of. So, sentences have what are called clauses. And clauses are defined as groups of words with at least one subject and one verb. Okay? So this is opposed to a phrase, because by definition a phrase is a group of words without a subject or verb. And I should say here, and or verb. So, a phrase is not a sentence. This is one thing that we have to understand right off the bat. So, the way people talk, a lot of times in conversation, casual conversation with friends, with relatives, with whoever, a lot of times when people talk, they don't talk in complete sentences, or not all the time anyway. A lot of times people will talk in short phrases rather than complete sentences. So when we talk about what is a sentence and what is not a sentence, a phrase is not a sentence, because a phrase does not contain a subject and or a verb combined together. Because when you do combine a subject-verb together, that's what makes a clause, and a clause can be classified as a sentence as long as one thing: and expresses a complete thought or idea. All right, so this is another very important point that you have to remember about a sentence. A clause is a group of words with at least one subject and one verb and expresses a complete thought or idea. Because there are types of clauses which exist that do not express a complete idea, even though they contain a subject and a verb. We'll talk about those types of clauses later. But for today, we're going to talk about a clause which is known as the independent clause, which is the example of what is called a simple sentence. So today, we're going to look at one essential type of clause, the one that is classified as a sentence, and that is called, as I said, the independent clause. All right, independent clause fulfills this definition. An independent clause is a group of words with at least one subject and one verb and expresses a complete idea or a complete thought. So independent clause is a sentence. So a sentence is something that can stand by itself or stand alone as a complete thought or an idea. So let's break it down. We say it needs at least one subject and one verb. So what is a subject and what is a verb? Well, very often nouns are subjects. So when we talk about nouns, what are we talking about? So what kinds of words can be subjects? Nouns. What are nouns? Okay, fair question. Nouns we define as people, places, things, or ideas. So people, places, things, or ideas are all different types of nouns. So generally speaking, if you're talking about the most basic level, the most foundational level, what kinds of words or what types of words can be used as subjects? So we say that in English, nouns are the most common words that can be used as subjects. People, places, things, or ideas. All right? So we're just going to focus on nouns today. There are other types of subjects that we can identify, but for today we're just going to focus on nouns to illustrate the point. So we're going to take care of the subject. So we got a subject, noun, one of these things, one of these categories. We also have to look at verbs. So what is a verb? All right? For the purposes of this illustration today, we're going to just say that verbs are words that show action, that show something that someone can do. So words like run, jump, write, read, fly, throw, to think, to walk, to talk. All of these types of words show action, something that someone can do. So these are going to be classified as verbs, things that people do. Now, when we take a subject and we add a verb, very oftentimes we have something called an object after a verb. So in English sentences, and again we're talking about sentences here, and we're talking about statements. We're not talking about questions at this point because questions involve a little bit different word order. So today we're just going to focus on sentences that are statements that end with a period. All right? Because periods are used at the end of sentences to mark the termination of that sentence. So most of the time, a statement will end with a period. Okay? And this is the punctuation mark for the period. So let's just look at a couple of simple examples. We'll get back to objects in a minute. But as I said, by definition, a sentence is a group of words with at least one subject and one verb. So it is possible to make a sentence which is also a complete idea with just two words. And in English this is possible and what we call simple sentences. So we're going to look at the term simple sentence. So simple sentence and independent clause, it's the same thing, right? So the definition I had up here earlier of independent clause is really the definition of a simple sentence. One subject, one verb, and complete idea. So let's take a look at a couple of sample sentences. So for instance, if I was to write this, birds fly. It is in fact a sentence. It has a subject and a verb, and it expresses a complete idea. So birds fly is a simple sentence. Okay? How do I know that birds is a subject? It's because birds are things, right? So what is a definition of a noun? One type of noun is a thing. Birds are things. They are animals. So birds fly. This is your noun, subject. This is your verb. Okay? So the word fly, as we just discussed, shows action. So something that something can do or someone can do. So, another example. Fish swim. Alright, there's your noun subject, fish, also a thing, and there's your verb swim, which shows an action. So, these are sentences. Technically speaking, these are simple sentences. They have one subject, one verb, and they express a complete idea. Alright, so if we take nouns such as birds and fish and add these verbs to them, it becomes a sentence. Now, it would be very irritating and boring and tedious for someone to write a story with just a sentence that has only 2 words in it. So we have to develop, more in-depth detail about these sentences. But for now, let's go back to this word object, because this will add another aspect or another detail to our sentence. So an object is also a noun in many cases. So there are different types of objects too. We don't have to get into that right now in too much detail. But objects are usually nouns, and they usually follow verbs. So in English sentences, or sentences that are written in English, the primary organization of that sentence, if it's a statement, subject plus verb plus object. Very, very common. The only thing you have to remember about objects is that they come after what are called action verbs. So as we described, verbs show action. So fly is an action verb, swim is an action verb. But not all sentences can have to use objects. But it does add more information to the sentence. So let me give you a couple of examples of how sentences would be used with objects. So let's take a look at this sentence, for instance. Mary plays. Now, Mary being a person, Mary would be a noun. Plays is a verb, so here's our noun subject, here's our verb. Now, when I say Mary plays, okay, that I could stop the sentence right there. Okay? Because plays, Mary plays. You have different meanings of the word play in English, many different meanings. So, she plays in the playground, she plays games, whatever. But this is not complete in the sense that I am going to understand absolutely the definition of this word plays unless I add a little bit more information. So, in this case, for instance, if I add an object and I say Mary plays, and then I ask myself, well, what does she play? Then I could add a sentence part like this: Mary plays the piano. All right, now I got a better picture. Now I got a better understanding of what you're trying to say. All right, so we're not talking about playing, Monopoly or any one of these board games, chess, checkers, this type of thing. We're talking about a musical instrument. And in English, we've used the same verb play to play a game as to play a musical instrument. So whether it's the piano, the violin, the guitar, whatever, it's a musical instrument. So this object over here, which we abbreviate O, shows us what Mary plays. And then it gives us more detail and more understanding of what the message that the person is trying to convey. All right, so this is a very basic organizational pattern for sentences. Another example. All right, let's do this one. So, people write. So, if I just ended the sentence there, people write, yes, but what do they write? So, in a sense, I need more information to deliver a more detailed message to whoever's listening or reading this sentence. So, what do people write? Well, let's do this. People write stories. So there's your object. Stories is a noun. It's a thing. People, obviously. Write is an action. So there's your verb. There's your noun subject. So, people write stories. Great. Now I know a little bit more detail. People can write letters, they can write emails, they can write recipes, they can write to-do lists, all of those kinds of things. But if I give this object here, what do they write? They write stories. That is more specific. All right? And then another example, Jason reads. So Jason reads. I could end the sentence there if I wanted, and it would still be a complete idea. But again, this verb needs to be a little bit more specific. What does he read? Does he read magazines? Does he read comic books? What does he read? So, when I say Jason reads, I add a little bit more information, it becomes more clear. Jason reads what? Reads books. Alright, there's my object. Alright? So, these words that we're using in the subject position are all nouns. Jason is also a noun. So, noun, all in the subject column, as I show here, everything in this subject column, these are all nouns. Everything in the verb column, these are all action verbs. So I need to specify that fact. Again, action verb. There are different kinds of verbs. There are action verbs and there are other kinds of verbs called linking verbs, which do not show action. These types of verbs are action verbs. Fly, swim, play, write, read. These are all action verbs. Now, in the case of the last three sentences here, I'm adding a little bit more detail. I'm adding a little bit more information about this verb. What does Mary play? She plays the piano. So this is my object. And again, the word piano, the word story, the word books, these are all nouns. So object noun is what we're looking at right now. What does Mary play? She plays the piano. What do people write? People write stories. What does Jason read? Jason reads books. So all of these would be complete sentences. And all of these would be classified as simple sentences. They do have a subject? Yes. They do have a verb? Do they have a complete idea? Yes. So yes and yes. The object gives more information? Yes. So the idea is more complete? That's good. We get a better understanding? That's good. So clauses, groups of words with at least one subject, one verb, and express a complete idea. That is what is known as the simple sentence. Generally, any kind of statement like these on the board are going to end with periods, and that is how you know the end of the sentence and the beginning of a new sentence after that. So, this is the first lesson, building blocks of sentences, what constitutes a clause, what are the components of clauses, what is the component of a sentence known as the simple sentence or the independent clause. So that's all for now. We're going to take another look at the different types of sentence parts in the next installment. So I hope you enjoyed watching. I hope this was helpful and useful. And we'll see you again very soon.